Potential chaos without divisions. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by for the best in discussion, debate, and analysis. Let's break it down in the SEC. We are just about halfway through the conference schedule in all the power conferences. The SEC, of course, started division play in 1992, adding South Carolina and Arkansas, bringing the conference total members up to 12 and dividing into two divisions and outlining a format of scheduling that carried through the 2023 season. But it's a new era in the SEC and across college football, and suddenly we are divisionless across the landscape. Is that good? Well, on one hand, we all know of numerous occasions in which the top two teams did not play in separate divisions, and we had the best team in a conference playing for the championship against the third best, fourth best, fifth best. I'm looking at you, Big Ten Western Division. Yes. But what we did have in those situations was a clear matchup. We had division winners that were clearly defined. Why? Well, number one, because of course the team with the best record would elevate to the conference championship game. But number two, if there was a tie for first place, those two teams, of course, played during the regular season. Therefore, the head-to-head winner moved on to the conference championship game. Give me a three-way tie. I cannot think of one in the history of all these conference championship games. I cannot think of a three-way tie, whether it be in the Big Ten Western Division or in the Coastal Division of the ACC. Those would be the two best places to go first and foremost. So if you know of one, I'm not going to carve through every season, but I have a pretty good memory for these kind of things. I do not recall a three-way tie. I'm sure there has been at some point a three-way tie for a division championship, and then you go through the tiebreaker system. But I've been saying it all off season, before a game was played, there will be at least one of these four power conferences that have a chaotic situation, a logjam tie for either first place or second place or a combination of both. A four-way tie for first place, a four-way tie for second place. Whatever the case might be, I guarantee there is going to be chaos. So let's look at each and every conference. We will start here with the SEC. Right now, Texas A&M and LSU are the two undefeated teams in the conference. How about if you would have laid that parlay wager back in August? Texas A&M and LSU at 4-0 and 3-0. Georgia's lost, Ole Miss is lost, Tennessee's lost, Alabama's lost, Texas is even lost. Everybody is lost. Well, we've got Georgia, Tennessee, Missouri, Texas, and Vandy with one loss. And then in terms of tie-breaking games that could be significant that have already been played, Missouri beat Vandy. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if Vandy would have won that game? Vandy would have 0 losses in the SEC, but they lost in overtime to Mizzou. Of course, Georgia beat Texas, and Texas A&M downed Missouri a couple weeks ago, 41-10. Now let's look at the contenders. So we're going to take the 0-loss teams and the 1-loss teams. Not that it's not possible that a current 2-loss team could work its way into a tie for second place and make their way to the SEC championship game. But with only an 8-game conference schedule, half of the games have been played already, roughly, depending on the team, either 3 or 4 games, that right now we've got a stack of 7 teams with either 0 or 1 loss. It's going to be difficult for a 2-loss team to make it into the SEC championship game. Texas A&M, undefeated. Of course, they got this date against LSU at home coming up on Saturday. They've got a game at South Carolina, at Auburn, and they've got Texas. And we know the way things go in college football, especially this season, some would say you can't guarantee on Texas A&M winning any of those games. They will be an underdog in one of them at Texas, that is for sure. We've got LSU taking on Texas A&M, of course. Bama, Florida, Vandy, and Oklahoma. So if things stay in this same order, LSU and Vandy's a big game, as they both have either 0 or 1 loss right now in the SEC. Georgia Bulldogs, of course, came up with a huge win in Austin over the weekend. They've got Florida in Jacksonville, of course, at Ole Miss, and a date against Tennessee. And again, Tennessee with 1 loss in the SEC along with Georgia. That could prove to be a huge game the second to last weekend of the season. For Tennessee, Kentucky, Mississippi State, at Georgia, and at Vandy. The Georgia and Vandy games, again, work into this possible tie-breaking issue. And then we've got Missouri taking on Bama this weekend. Bama's already lost 2 games. They've got Oklahoma. They got South Carolina on the road. Mississippi State on the road, and Arkansas. So they're going to be an underdog and are this weekend at Alabama, but otherwise they should be a favorite across the board, although Mizzou has not looked impressive. Texas has Vandy this weekend. How about that? Bama lost there. How about Texas losing at Vandy as a big favorite? Of course, they've got Florida, they got Arkansas, they've got Kentucky, and they've got a date at Texas A&M to close out the season, and that could be enormous, especially if Texas A&M wins this weekend against LSU. And finally, we've got to look at Vandy. This is fun. Vandy's in contention for the SEC championship. Texas this week, at Auburn, South Carolina, at LSU, Tennessee. That's a difficult schedule, of course. They're going to be an underdog, maybe even at Auburn, but certainly against Texas, LSU, and Tennessee. All right, now let's size it up. There's a zillion ways we could do this. It's impossible to forecast, having only played 3 or 4 games, that it's going to conclude like this. We will continue this series, and it's going to narrow down, and the possibilities are going to dwindle, and we'll be able to go case-by-case scenario and really look at it going into the final 2 weeks and then that final weekend. But as it stands right now, let's just play it out. If all the favorites win, which of course they won't, but if all the favorites win, also keeping in mind that it doesn't have to play out this way to be this chaotic. You could have some of the favorites winning and some of the favorites losing, and we could still come out with this scenario. If all the favorites win, projected favorites in these games, we will have a 4-way tie for first place in the SEC. Texas A&M, LSU, Georgia, Texas, all at 7-1. How about that? 4-way tie for first place. Who goes to the SEC championship game? Fortunately, in the SEC, for these teams, they've got nothing to fear. They will move on to the college football playoff. We've had that discussion and that debate throughout the offseason, of course. The somewhat meaningless nature, except for seeding, of the SEC and Big Ten championship games. But this is going to be extra fun when we get to the ACC in the Big 12. So that's the lineup if the favorites win. We know that that's not going to hold true across the board with 7 teams in contention times roughly 3 to 4 games left to play. You're talking 25 or 30 ball games. So there's going to be 5 or 6 upsets at least. Keep in mind that we've got team channels surrounding the SEC and also an SEC conference channel. Please check it out. Also, these weekly live streams, Bama, Texas, Mizzou, Ole Miss, Florida. Check them all out right here at the Voice of College Football. We'll be back with more scenarios among the Power 4 conferences.